in Colombia, Chile, and Brazil, and they were chosen since they're relevant to community-based care. After a short break, we'll have a second segment, including a plenary session with comments, questions, and answers to foster exchanges among countries. We will first start with Colombia's experience. A national care system is being established in Colombia, seeking to recognize and showcase community-based care nationwide. Natalia Moreno, manager for the National Care Policy at the Office of the Vice President of Colombia, will present the Colombian National Care System. And she will be followed by Diana Rodriguez, District Secretary for Women's Affairs in Bogota. And she will present the experience of the Manzanas del Cuidado, the care blocks in Bogota. You have the floor, Natalia.
Good morning, Marco. Good morning, and thank you. I convey to you the greetings from the Chief of the Cabinet. And also I want to thank you for organizing this network meeting and for your commitment to the agenda and to care systems. I wanted to thank all of the countries that are with us today, and I especially wanted to thank the Secretariat of Women here in Bogota. They are part of this panel being hosted by Colombia. So we wanted to tell you very briefly about how we intend to implement the national care system in the country. This will be the first part of my presentation, and then we will talk about a successful model that was approved, and that is the case of Bogota. So now let's go to the next slide. I understand that you'll be passing the slides. Thank you. So to get started, next slide, please. And the next one. Why do we need a national care system in Colombia? Here you can see some information. We have 16 million people in the country today that need permanent care or different levels of support. As you can see by looking at the numbers that we have here, we have more than 4 million people who are over the age of 65. And please go back. I'll let you know when I'm ready to change the slides. More than 4 million people over the age of 65. And that is the group that we have to analyze as we look at this network today. And Colombia is like other countries in the region in terms of the fact that we have an aging population. There's a change in the population pyramid, and you can see the number of people over the age of 60 or 65. That segment is growing all the time in our country, and that means that we have to look at the care in the short and medium term for this population. Not everyone requires care or support, but we have seen that we have to strengthen our aging policy for the country. And also we have to coordinate that with the national care system. That is something we're working on as we look at the institutional architecture of our ministries. Right now, this is a topic under the Ministry of Health, and we consider that it should have a much broader scope looking into the needs of support or care. But we have 16 million people in the country that require support or care. Most of these people are elderly, and they require our support. Then here we have an idea of the care, those who provide care. We have a public system that is not well coordinated. That's something we have to modify, adjust, and then we have remunerated and non-remunerated work, most of it done by women. 19 million women do non-remunerated care work in Colombia, and 7 million of those women are women that do this full time. And there was an increase of 1.5 million before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we have 5 million women that were doing full-time, non-remunerated care work. And now we are up to the 19 million. And we women are devoting 4 hours more a day to non-remunerated work to satisfy the care needs that we identified in the first slide. And if we look at this within the framework of the labor market, we find that almost 700,000 women do domestic work. That would be remunerated work, and that affects their labor rights. Only 18% of these women have access to a pension, to Social Security, even though we have very strict standards that call for the formalization of the sector. However, 61% earn less than the minimum wage, 77% receive in-kind payment, and that shows the precarious nature of this work. So that type of remunerated work will also be given priority in our system. Also, we have a machista culture, and because of that, we women are the ones that provide most of this care. DANE says that 70% of men are convinced that women are better suited to this work. And that means that we need a cultural transformation also to assure the success of the care system. We have to see that this leads to a lack of opportunities for women. Now, having identified the problem, what we are suggesting is now we have a sound legal framework. That is something that you just heard. So the first thing is that in Law 2281 of this year, 2023, created the Ministry of Equality and Equity. And in Article 6, we created a national care system. This needs to be mentioned because that means that there is a law in Colombia supported by all of the parties in Congress that requires that the country implement the national care system. That is, of course, one of the legal ways of institutionalizing a system, and it was one of the first actions taken by the current administration. Also, we just approved the National Development Plan on Friday. The president signed the law, and that means it entered into effect. And here, to this legal framework, we add the fact that the basis for the national development system describes the 7 different components. I would point to component 4, and this has to do with the chief of cabinet, and that is all of the public popular partnerships of community-based care. But also for the first time in Colombia, in the National Development Plan, we have 2 articles that require the national government and all of its ministries to coordinate all of the services, as you mentioned, Marco, to implement the national care system. And in addition to that, also recognizing non-remunerated work in the rural sector as productive work. Those are 2 articles that provide us with the legal underpinnings we need to be able to require the commitment of all of the parts of the national government to assure the success of this care system. Now, also, as was mentioned, for the first time, Colombia has an agency that is in charge of implementing the national care system. And this is under the Vice President's office here in Colombia, and it is supported by a decree that was signed in September of 2022 by the President of Colombia, giving Francia Marquez, our Vice President, the powers to implement the national care system. And as was just said, we soon will be presenting to the country the institutional architecture of this new ministry. And that is something that we're working on for the national care system so that that unit can become part of the ministry. It's important that we have specialized agencies to implement the care systems so as to be able to continue to fine-tune the institutional framework. Now, in addition to this, in addition to having a law creating the system, also having the National Development Plan, calling for obligatory implementation, we're now formulating the public policies in Colombia. This is called a COMPES, and we are working on developing this policy, working side by side with the planning office. And we have different working groups, and we're doing a participatory analysis that will focus on the problem that we have with care in Colombia. We have 8 different studies that have been commissioned. This is being financed by the IDB. And one of the studies, as you can see, is identifying the needs of the elderly, but also we are looking at the needs of populations that will profit from this national care system. We hope to have the results of these studies in a couple of months, so we will be able to diagnose this public policy. And as we said, that policy needs to be participatory. And part of the idea of these studies is to hear the voice of the communities, to listen to what non-remunerated caregivers say, to hear from boys, girls, teenagers. The whole idea is to define public policy reflecting the needs of our citizenry. Also, we have had meetings with many different ministries, different entities at the national level. Yesterday, we had our second interinstitutional meeting for the care system, and there is a strong commitment on the part of this government to move ahead on this policy, making sure that it applies throughout the country. Also, we have an external advisory committee that was established, and that committee will support our design of the national care system. We have 13 national, international consultants that will support us as we design this program. Here you can see Julio Banco from Uruguay, Valeria Esquivel from Argentina, Adriana Guzman from Bolivia, an indigenous woman, and she has worked with different community programs. Arturo Escobar, who is an expert. And I think that the vice president has been clear in saying that we have to have our own view of the need for care. And we so far have followed the models from the global north, from Europe, but we also have to look at practices in the global south and looking at ancestral, indigenous, Afro-descendant types of care, because all of that is a type of care that needs to be incorporated into our national plan. Also, we have people that represent the indigenous and the campesino populations. So we have a lot to learn from the people that work throughout the country. And lastly, I wanted to say that we have to fine-tune the institutional design, looking at public policy, its formulation, and we are also engaged in pilots in terms of community-based care. We started with a project financed by the ILO in the Caribbean area of the country. And there we're looking at community-based care organizations to strengthen the ancestral practices, because the institutional services will not necessarily solve all of the needs for care, especially if we look at remote areas where the state doesn't have a strong presence. So we have to look at what care systems exist there that may need to be strengthened. Also, under the vice president, we will set up a rural care service, and the idea is to reach rural areas where there's a lack of social infrastructure. So we will have mobile units, and I'm sure that the Secretariat of Women in the next presentation will explain this. So this is basically what I had to say. I hope that I have stayed within the time allotted to me, but this is the vision that we have here in Colombia. And with that, I would give the floor to the next speaker.
Diana, adelante, por favor.
Muchas gracias.
Diana, go ahead. First of all, I wanted to apologize to our interpreters. I am sorry that I am so hoarse, but I didn't want to cancel my speech. So I wanted to thank the IDB, but especially I want to thank the Vice President's office in Colombia for having invited me. So also I greet the Chief of Staff. But we have been working together on this Bogota care system. So it's truly a pleasure to see how all of this is thriving and how this service has grown, opening up services in new areas. So let me tell you about what we call the district system, is because Bogota is a district. And so it basically covers Colombia's capital. What is this system? We try to combine new and already existing services to cover the needs for care in a co-responsible way. The responsibility is shared by Bogota, the national government, the private sector, communities, and households. And what is the purpose? The idea is to balance caregiving, and in this way, by balancing the supply of care, the idea is for women and caregivers to have more time so they can develop personally, they can take care of themselves, they can look after their own well-being, also generate income, and also they can get involved in political action. Now, why is this important? Because there are 8 million people living in Bogota, of which 4 million are women. And of the 1.2 million women, which is the size of the city of Montevideo, those women are involved in providing non-remunerated care. So they wash, they iron, they take care of children, they deal with the disabled, people that require support, the elderly. That means that 1.2 million women are trapped not only in monetary poverty, but also in a time poverty. They have no time to develop themselves, to generate an income, to take care of themselves. And that is why we have to realize that the central part of this program needs to address that. And what are we after? The 3 R's. Now, Bogota has its own powers in the district, and it is supporting the 3 R's. First of all, recognizing the caregivers, the work of caregiving. It tries to redistribute care in a more equitable way and to reduce caregiving, which has been a burden placed unequally on women. Now, who is the target? Who is the target population for this program? First of all, the caregivers themselves. Most of them are women, and there are other services which are education, well-being, and income generation, things that have been neglected by these women. But also, we provide them professional, recreational services for the people they're taking care of. These would be children under the age of 13, adults, and then the third component is a cultural transformation. And that is why another target is men and the families of the caregivers. Why? Because we're not going to be able to recognize, redistribute, or reduce without changing the culture and the gender distribution of labor, where so much of the burden has fallen on the shoulders of women. But exactly where is this target population located? How do we reach that population? We have 3 ways of operating. First of all, we have what we call the manzanas de cuidado. Then we have the care buses, and then also services at home. Now, that is something that was mentioned early on about having to have a local service. So exactly what is the manzana del cuidado? This is an ideal block in the city, and this is the way, and I'm going to show you that in Bogota we have 19 manzanas or blocks of care, but this is the concept. All of these manzanas are a physical area in the city where there's something like 800 meters around. In other words, it can be accessed by walking 20 minutes at the most. You can find all the services for that population, the caregivers, those requiring care, and the men and the families that need support. Now, there is an anchor in the dark gray building on the left. And here you can see the coordinator of the Secretary for Women, that's the coordinator of this block. An important thing is that all the services that I talked about, education, well-being, cultural transformation, are not provided by the Secretariat of the Women. We are the head, we're the leader of the care system. We created it, we implemented, but the services are coordinated across 13 sectors of the administration, the health sector, education. So in this block, in this physical area, we have all of the services to serve these three populations. Now, what are the principles? First of all, simultaneity of services, care, services for those that have traditionally been providing the care and those that require care. Why is this important? So that caregivers can actually reach the services. If the grandmother is taking care of a brother, a sister, grandchildren, that person has no way to look for well-being or educational services. So we want to make it easy. The second criterion is proximity. Proximity because these physical areas are close to the houses. And so this is a nearby inclusive service. The whole idea is to increase inclusiveness. So these blocks are close to where people need the service. And also, a woman may be using the community laundry to wash the clothes, drop off the grandchild, or take lessons. And also, we're using existing infrastructure. And that is something that was said by Alberto when he talked about EUROsociAL, saying that now he has to think about inclusive cities. And inclusive cities have the potential of making better use of existing infrastructure.
La infraestructura existente.
This is why in Bogota we have used existing infrastructure, I'll show you how, to kick off with the manzanas, the squares there, rather than having to wait for 3 or 4 years until a new one opens up. Next slide, please. There we go. That is one care block, the second one we opened up, and that's an anchor entity. The community center already existed in Bogota, but was only used by one entity in the district, the Secretariat for Social Integration, which provided some services. So we converted that building into the flagship entity for the block, which allowed for all sectors to offer services, training, education, healthcare, psychological and legal support services for women, the opportunity to complete high school studies, bike parking, laundries, everything there. So you see this development center, the square, and the photographs are actually pictures of the block. You see, we opened these community-based laundries, so women can actually do the washing just in a couple of hours instead of having to spend a whole day. So, you know, also the opportunity of having the children looked after gives women some respite. They can even access some yoga or other activities. And these are some more pictures indoors. I just want to convey to you the feeling, the vibe of these manzanas. There's a swimming pool there, which already existed, but what used to happen was the women used to go and just look on as the kids, grandchildren, learned how to swim. And now they are giving the opportunity to learn themselves. So that's some time for them as well, in addition to psychological and legal support, in addition to the other integrated services delivered. And the manager talked about the care buses, which is the mobile care blocks, the manzanas on wheels. We have offered 400,000 interventions. And what happens in the rural context is that there's often no infrastructure, and sometimes even in the urban setting, no infrastructure that you can reuse, or there are even remote locations where no social investment has been made, so you have to wait until things get built. This is why we created the Care Bus, which is the mobile version of the manzanas, which offers women the opportunity to complete the high school studies, learn how to use a computer while their children or grandchildren are being looked after in the other sectors and get healthcare, whatever. So this is also another pillar so that we have the simultaneity and complementarity and flexibility also in the rural settings in addition to the urban ones. Now, one key question has to do with community-based care. In Bogota, we began to offer services such as high school completion, the laundries, and all these things we offer women, but always based on the recognition that care has always been at the community level. So we decided to undertake research on unremunerated care work in the community setting in Bogota, so as to understand how the work unfolded. We did this between August and November of 2021 on the understanding that joint responsibility for care will only be possible if we actually integrate community care, community-based care. So the research was conducted around 8 care squares or blocks, the manzanas, trying to figure out what sorts of care was being delivered in that area and in adjacent areas. So we looked at 15 community-based initiatives, and the results of the survey showed some of the main forms of community-based care. You have community-based gardens, or, you have also care for children, shelters, women's circles, sports clubs. There's a whole lot of different ways communities created the care paths they needed. And this is important to bear in mind so that we can integrate this, and also with a view to understanding what type of care citizens themselves demand. So what have we found here? A more detailed description in terms of care for individuals, what is offered: play, acting, singing, reading, comfort, advisory and counseling services, promoting training pathways. This as regards care for individuals, but it's also care for animals. Some women dedicate their time to looking after 15 cats or dogs that they rescue and feed. And what have we found within the community context? Some provide and prepare food, others rescue animals. And there's a third pillar. These are initiatives related to looking after the common goods, the planet, animals. And what does this include? Cleaning or maintaining certain areas or strengthening the environmental awareness. Now, who does this work? 86% of the initiatives, and by the way, 68% are spearheaded by women. Again, we see that in community-based work, 7 out of 10 initiatives are led by women, the same as direct care. 86% engage exclusively in community-based care. And then there's almost 40% formal organizations, but also 34% informal organizations or collectives. And then there's also individuals doing this. Almost half are within the manzanas and the rest are outside, which shows that the integration within and without is also important, consistent with the government's guidelines. We've been looking at those too. And in wrapping up, let me present this mapping that we did to organize the location of the initiatives to see where they were to be found. And you have the ones for individuals, for animals, and for common goods divided by color. The idea of this was to see how things got organized across the territories. And now, yes, in conclusion, let me say that the coordination between the local and national government is good practice, to see what has worked well locally, what has worked at the community level, and how that can be elevated to the national government level. I think that the buses as a solution for the rural areas or those affected by armed conflict are experiences that are very expedient and can be replicated elsewhere, even across the world. One of the strengths of these solutions has to do with the fact that they're flexible, replicable, adaptable to the models of each city and or country, and they also help build more inclusive, closer to people's cities that are organized around individuals, coming closer to them rather than forcing people to have to go all the way to the services. And this also offers a solution to the climate crisis, because closer 15-minute cities help reduce social problems, and these social strategies help lessen the impact of climate change. Thank you very much, Natalia and Diana, for presenting the experience in building the national system, and also for sharing the experience in care service delivery at the local level. And Diana said that most services are at the local level. And secondly, it is very important to ensure that the services are accessible to individuals. And this is why we are now going to look at two experiences where the services reach out to the elderly. We will first have a presentation focused on the experience of the Care Brigade in Santiago de Chile, an initiative offering assistance to older persons who have no support networks, while at the same time creating employment opportunities for the care sector. Rosario Olivares is the Deputy Director for Gender Equity, Sexual Diversity and Inclusion at the Municipality of Santiago de Chile, and she will present this experience. Rosario, the floor is yours. Hello there. Thank you very much for the invitation. Warm greetings to all. I am also delighted to take part in this activity with Natalia and Diana. We had a chance to meet a while ago in Bogota. And we in Chile have been closely looking at the work you've been doing. For all those of us working on care issues, that's provide an inspiration. So again, very pleased to share this meeting with you. Let me share my presentation with you and mention very briefly, in Santiago, we've got what we call a district-based care system. It's called Santiago Te Cuida, Santiago looks after you. As Diana said, it interconnects municipal services that work around care. And within those services, you find different programs. And we have chosen to present the Care Brigade today, a program that we take particular pride in because it's our own program. We have state level programs, municipal programs, but also given the needs that have arisen over time, we decided to work on the needs we actually faced to create our own programs. And the care system in Santiago has involved some serious work, especially under the two women mayors we had in the city. And work began, and we decided to carry on the work so as to design not just a care system, but a care city and a care society. I think it is also important to note that the institutional structure we have to support the care system has shown progress, and we now work at an office which is the Office of the Deputy Director for Gender Equity, Sexual Diversity and Inclusion. And so we work for women, indigenous peoples, sexual diversities, migrants, and persons with disabilities. So we mainstream the theory and action of feminist intersectionality, and we don't see people as a whole, but as individuals who are diverse and with a focus on historically excluded groups where we tend to find more shortcomings and also gaps in terms of the acquisition and recognition of rights. So it's about decolonizing strategies, multicultural strategies. And well, this is how we worked in the capital city of Santiago. As mentioned by a moderator, the program arose out of two circumstances. One was the COVID-19 pandemic context, which started back in 2020. There was already some voluntary work being done to provide support to the neediest, but the pandemic was also an opportunity for us to realize that there were a great many older persons who had no support network, but also one thing, as borne out by various reports, women lost 10 years of advances in terms of financial empowerment, in addition to the large number of women who were jobless. We had an office of women back then, which created a women in the field, a program that sought to offer support to older persons while at the same time offering remunerated work opportunities to women who were willing to work as caregivers. After some interesting discussions, we decided to look for a different name for the movement. And of course, the idea was not just to talk about women, but rather about people who offer care, caregivers who may also be men, as is the case currently with our brigade. So we put in place a pilot program to offer support for older persons who had very limited or no support network. So for 3 months, 20 women who were heads of household or who were unemployed, we had them take part in a training program for this work. And of course, as this was against the backdrop of the pandemic, we had to offer online training in addition to the links we had with a number of institutions that offered the support. And we worked on the basis of 4 training modules based on health, legal, social, and the people-centered accompaniment dimensions. These women were 18. 2 of them actually were able to get jobs, and 16 were hired by the municipality of Santiago to offer support and company in a number of tasks, such as buying medicines, picking up medicines, running errands, doing shopping. So here you have some pictures, and the idea has been to build an increasing corpus of knowledge relating to care, in addition to what they themselves already had as part of their own background and life story. It should also be noted that Santiago is a city in which probably over half of the population is migrants. So the members of the brigade are highly multicultural. You have Chilean women, of course, but women from Venezuela, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia. And the average age of brigade members is currently 41. In 2021, when the process first started, we offered services to 1,137 older persons, 861 of which of them being women, and 50% were heavily dependent, and others had severe dependency issues. We now have this care brigade team comprising different backgrounds. We also have a coordinator. You have a social worker who coordinates. We have occupational therapists. We have nursing technicians, physiologists, physiotherapists, and we also have caregivers who obviously build the core of the team. The target group for our work is older persons, persons with disabilities, and self-sufficient, though fragile individuals who need support for some day-to-day activities, in addition to other work done in coordination with support networks. The goals continue to be revised, discussed, and amended as we gather process data. The idea is to provide support and company to older persons, also offering temporary help to those who deliver care for them to also have time to look after themselves or to do other activities, offering as well some relief staff, and the idea is also to give them skills in caring for older individuals in the case of those who reside in Santiago. And the team also uses different diagnostic instruments to look at the situation of the individuals they go to work with, for example, the Bartel test, and we also do physiotherapy work to assess the living conditions of older people at home.
Another thing that we think is important in terms of assuring the economic autonomy of these women is that we could certify. We're the first city in Chile that certified the caregivers. This recognizes the work already being done by these women. We worked with a university. Also, we worked with an agency of the UN system, and they kindly financed the project. And the Ministry of Work put together this program called Chile Values, Chile Valora. And in that way, we are able to certify these skills. And that way they can work not only with the brigade, but also they can find jobs thanks to the tools that they learn by participating in this process. So caregivers have different types of work within the home. And here we divided this work into two groups, as you can see: support to go to the supermarket, to buy different things, to go to the doctor, also to provide transportation, to go to medical appointments. We also have a space for physical care. That is something that we would like to do. It's called Casa Igualdad, similar to the Manzanas in Bogota. And that is where all these activities would be delivered. And then we have other activities that are delivered in the home. For example, here we have cleaning, organizing, tidying things up in the home. Also, we know that the pandemic was a crisis, but also we know that aging brings mental health problems with it. And we're working along those lines too. There is coordination, which is part of this project that is done by the social worker that supervises a team that arranges for specific training, supervises the work team, and also is in charge of requesting social benefits, because often the elderly do not know how to access services that are available. This is something beyond what they can do on their own. Then we have psychological care of different types, spontaneous care in the field, also psychotherapy up to 6 sessions. Also, we do training and mental health, and also provide self-care. We have legal services that work in the same way, more or less, and this is very important, especially for the elderly who have been abandoned. And they need to be able to process different requests to obtain support, legal or otherwise. Then something else that we do is provide kinesiology as part of the care. Here, this is important in terms of the services delivered, but also we do training to provide at least basic knowledge. Here we have occupational therapy and also the TENS care. The TENS are nursing technicians, and we may not have a point of care, but we do have a community bus that takes people to the different areas where these services are provided. We think that this is a process where we have to socialize this knowledge, and we have a lot of work that we need to do bit by bit so as to socialize this program. Just recently, on March 7th, we were able to inaugurate our first Casa de Cuidado care home. And here, this is the brigade, and we would like to have a program that is well accepted and that will well serve our country in terms of providing a care system. And also, in picking up on what Diana was saying, this is a local program, and it's a first step in terms of public policy because we're working closer with people. And also we can see that the government of Colombia is now taking the experience of a local government to migrate this program to the national level. And I think that that's very important in terms of the perspective of the work that has been done in the capital city, in Bogota. Here we have some of the challenges to improve the Care Brigade. This is a program that was set up just recently, so we have to look at the structuring of the program, different agreements, and I'm sure that this applies to your countries too, where we have a serious mental health progress, so we have to enter into agreements, not only with psychotherapists, but also with psychiatrists. That is something where we are implementing programs for the elderly. And also, we want there to be home care so people can age in place. Also, we are integrating different professionals, different technicians, because we see that many of the elderly have been abandoned and they need other things so as to thrive. So this is a summary in terms of what we do in our Care Brigade, and we hope that this will be a helpful contribution to our discussion today. But once again, thank you for your invitation. Thank you, Rosario. Thank you for sharing with us your experience with this Care Brigade. Now we're going on to another local initiative, and this is in Brazil. The presentation will be in Portuguese, so I remind you that there is interpretation into Spanish and English. You would have to choose the channel. This week in Brazil, they inaugurated an intersectoral working group to implement this program. It was an event with the participation of the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry for Implementation of the Public System, also the Human Rights Office, and many different institutions, all at the federal level. But in Brazil, there's some very interesting local initiatives. In some cases, those initiatives are implemented in the health sector. Why? Because when there is no network in the community to support the elderly, hospitalizations can be long, and this is very costly for the health sector. So in some cases, the health sector at the local level has organized itself to provide services to optimize the use of different hospital services, but at the same time improve the quality of life of the elderly. And we know that they want to age at home and in their own communities. Also, this winds up improving the quality of life of caregivers. Today, we're going to hear about the experience of a program called Elderly Care, and it's being implemented in the city of Sao Paulo to serve older people in vulnerable situations. This program has been awarded nationally and internationally because of its best practices. It has created changes in the areas served, and it represents an exemplary experience in the country. Rosa Marcucci is the coordinator of the technical area of healthcare for the elderly of the Municipal Health Department of Sao Paulo, will be sharing their experience with us. So, Rosa, please go ahead, and thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. We would like to thank you all for the invitation, for the opportunity of presenting our program, and also to get to know these amazing experiences that certainly has given us food for thought. I will start sharing my presentation.
Nós estamos, então, na área da saúde, né?
We work under the State Health Secretariat in the so-called Basic Attention or Care Department, and this is part of our secretariat. São Paulo is a large population. We have 12 million inhabitants. It is the largest population in Brazil, and we have already reached a high concentration of the elderly population in the whole city.
Mais centrais, mas que vem aumentando consideravelmente também nas regiões mais distantes do centro, nas periferias. Atualmente, nós temos...
Currently, we have a concentration of the elderly population greater than the actual state and greater than the number of the elderly in Brazil. We have 2 million elderly, 27% of the population. In some of these regions...
Desculpa a interrupção. Pode pôr a apresentação na pantalla completa?
Já está.
Não, vemos a apresentação com...
Ah, perdão, vou tirar e colocar novamente, então. Aqui. E agora?
Agora perfeito, obrigado.
Ah, que bom.
That's perfect, thank you. So, in some of our so-called micro territories, we already have 30% of the population represented by the elderly population. A good part of this population will live alone, or maybe elderly people who also live with elderly people. So they end up caring one for the other. Here we have a forecast showing that the elderly population in little time will go above the 30%. And this is a reason of great concern with regards to caretaking. So it was interesting to mention the technical team for the launch of the national policy of a caretaker program. This is a very important moment for all of us. We were very excited with this launch, and this is definitely an important need, especially for all of us who work with the elderly population in Brazil. The São Paulo municipality has been working on ways to deal with the process of population aging, trying to work with prevention, trying to maintain the elderly population's independence and autonomy so that we can truly allow us to have a support to guarantee a better quality of life for this population. We have a network for caretaking of the elderly population with a number of services among the different sectors, the public policy, civil society, and we have some specific services that will meet the demand of the elderly population in health. Among them, the caretaker program and reference units for elderly health units. These are specialized services to meet the demand of the more fragile individuals. The elderly caretaker program or carer program will have as a priority to work in the household. So we will go to the house of this elderly population, especially for those that have a higher vulnerability status, such as a social vulnerability and also clinical or health frailty. This program will have the support of a team. This is a reduced team. It has a low cost. Each team will have around 120 elderly people under their care, and we will prioritize those who live alone or or maybe those who have an insufficient network or frail family ties, sometimes due to violence against the elderly. And so we will prioritize this kind of population. This initiative started in 2003 through a reference unit in the region, which is a central region of the city of São Paulo, concentrating many elderly people, those who lived alone, those who lived in precarious situations with also health issues. So in 2008, we increased the team, and then in 2008, we had 4 teams working with this population, and today we have 50 teams in the whole of the municipality. It's important to mention that this is an initiative of the municipal government of São Paulo. Our budget is from the municipality. We don't have PAI as a national program, but we do hope that now, through the launch of this new program, we will be able to transform this into a federal policy or government policy. So these are the ones who actually kickstarted this program in the city. Our team will have a social assistance system with the coordinator of the team. And so we have social services, and even though we are in the health sector, it was important to have a social service person as a coordinator of this program, because this is the professional that has the right profile and understanding of how to work with a health team, with a multidisciplinary team, but also bringing together the different resources from the local community to have a good support network and other resources that might guarantee quality of life and more dignity for the program target population. The health team will have a physician, a nurse, and a nurse technician, also someone from the management department. And we have also the caretakers. These are professionals that have a technical degree, preferably from the neighborhood, people that live in that same territory, and they will be also, this is also something that will generate jobs for the region. And also mostly women. These are women that will be the main caretakers. We also have a vehicle, a car, to take these, to transport these, this population whenever they have to go to a doctor, for instance. So it's important to understand that this plan will include support, any kind of daily activities, the basic daily activities or whatever is basic for the caring of that person, up to external actions such as taking them to go to the market, to medical offices or sometimes to a service in any kind of church or any kind of social action, because socialization is also one of the purposes of this program. The average cost is of around 80,000 reais per month, around $15,000. And we have today 6,000 people or elderly population under our care. This is the criteria for the inclusion criteria. We have 60 years so it's 60 years plus, with some kind of functional issues or dependency, reduced mobility, or difficulty of access to public policies or health services, any kind of risk of institutionalizations. And this was one of the great reasons behind the implementation of the program, so as to avoid institutionalization of this population, and social exclusion issues, which are quite frequent for this population. The flow always happens through the basic health unit. So it will be in the primary care setting. We have an assessment that will be done for all the elderly population that will participate or go to the basic health unit. So this will be a multidimensional assessment of the elderly, assessing issues like frailty, of mobility issues, and vulnerability. So this person who meets the inclusion criteria will be referred to the program. This person will be assessed by the team, and they will have from that point forward a plan. So we develop some criteria to establish our program, our support. For instance, the functional issue, how dependent are they of help in their daily activities, the quality of their network, their social network available to that person, and also whatever they are able to have in their area. Also issues related to autonomy, and based on this assessment, classification, and inclusion criteria, we will define what is the complexity level of that person and how can they participate in the program. And this will therefore allow us to develop a program in terms of the caretaker this person needs, and also the frequency of the visits. And this might happen 1, 2, even 5 times a week. The program will work from a Monday to Friday. We do not have services on weekends. So the support might be simple, intermediary, or complex type of care. The profile of those that are participating in this program are more advanced age. Most of them have more than 75 years of age. Most of them are women, and 36% already are elderly with a high level of frailty in terms of their health. 25% live alone, and a good part of these elderly will have some kind of dependency. They have depression, they use many medications, and cognitive issues are also part of this. So these are people that already have some kind of compromised cognitive behavior. And this is important which would therefore indicate the need of some kind of support. And our actions are very broad, they are varied. So we have basic attention, advanced attention, but we are always careful with their health, considering the breadth and reach of a health concept. So here I presented some of the examples. And for instance, hygiene, skin diseases. And here we have an evolution of a patient that had blood pressure issues. For those that are still very dependent, this is very frequent. There is a deficit in terms of their care. So it's Sometimes they have lesions on their skins due to the fact that they are always in bed. Also, activities related to their dental health. Also, we have house calls. We have a multi-professional team supporting the team of this program. Hygiene, basic hygiene, both for the elderly person, him or herself, as well as hygiene in their environment, their house. We also work with their self-image. We try to help them with their self-esteem. We have some pictures of before and after. And this is some hair coloring, makeup. This is an evolution. When he was included, this person was very dependent and with issues in terms of their mobility, and they are having a bath. Here is the same person now with some support, so you can see an evolution in their image. And this is a gentleman who was included in the beginning, and now he looks much happier, healthier after the program.
This shows the vulnerability. We care for elderly people in very deprived areas. We have teams both in the central area, but we also have in the outskirts of the cities. Some of our regions are also rural. Our teams also go there. So the team works not only caring for the person, but also providing improvement around their homes. So this is full care that is provided to these people. This is a specific case, a case history. This lady was admitted in 2016 at the age of 84. She was hypertensive, but she lived in very precarious conditions. She used to accumulate old pieces that weren't good for anything, and also animals. The basic health unit was called by the neighbors because of the lack of hygiene, and also for accumulating animals, even animals with venom. She had no identifiable family ties. She lived alone. So the team triggered the provision of local resources, urban cleaning and zoonotic teams. Animals were treated and given back to her so that she would still keep them as pets, living in a healthier condition. And here, this is when they were putting their belongings together, but there was no furniture, so we donated, we found donation of furniture to her, and also electrical appliances that were obtained from civil society, NGOs, improving her condition. This is her vaccination card. This is when she was vaccinated against COVID. And it should be stressed that this was a crucial program during the pandemic. The elderly people cared for by the program could be monitored, and we provided greater protection to these people. The carers would go to their homes and they would care for them in the best way possible, sometimes coming to their doors or shopping for them for food and for medication and delivering it to them. We had a lower COVID rate amongst the elderly cared for if we compare to the average of that municipality. This is the elderly lady celebrating her 90th birthday. The team always looks for family ties and tries to reinstate family ties, but she was actually someone who had no family ties. So she reached the age of 90, and that was celebrated at the team premises with the team. And at the beginning of the treatment, the team tries to achieve a certain goal, especially if they have perfect cognition. And she had a dream. She had never been to a restaurant in her life. So the team offered her that and managed to take her to a restaurant. It should also be stressed that she had no income, and the social worker managed to provide her a minimal state provision pension, and that was very important for supporting her. So as I said, this is a very wide-ranging set of activities. I think that we can see how we can change these people's lives, even visually, and it offers them dignity. Often they are abandoned and neglected, not only by society, they are also sort of self-abandoned. We managed to rehabilitate these elderly people and to bring them back into our society by improving their quality of life. Thank you.